Harold Hillman, who is an executive coach, and he knows all the stuff and things that you need to know about your work-life balance. So today, we're going to be talking about giving and receiving feedback. Now, this can be a very difficult thing. There's always a bit of a sting in it, quite often in that conversation, isn't it? I mean, feedback, it's. I know we should be able to take it on constructively, but sometimes it burns.
Yes, Mel. For many people, feedback is a negative construct, and that's reinforced by across our lives when people say, "I'd like to give you some feedback."
Yeah,
that's right. You brace yourself. You walk in. Your demeanor is a bit closed. You're ready for the worst, because for many people, they only get feedback when things have gone wrong.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah, as opposed to getting feedback. Feedback is critical for growth, certainly in any business. For people who work, anyone who works who wants to increase their influence, it is important to occasionally hear what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. But for many people, they hear what they aren't doing well, which is a bit paradoxical to this whole human need for esteem and for affirmation and really hearing that you belong and make a difference. We sometimes take that for granted. We don't say positive things to people. We only point out the negative things, which then reinforces feedback as a negative construct as opposed to a positive one.
So do most companies require a formal feedback session to be held between an employee and their manager?
Most do.
Yeah.
In terms of what we call performance management. And that is just making sure that we are building a person's capability and their confidence at the same time. And so feedback is important, again, especially around the ability to influence successful outcomes.
Quite often, though, it does just feel like it's a box ticked and a form filled out and filed somewhere, and there's no actual, you don't really gain much from it as an employee.
Yeah, it's one of those meetings, particularly if it only happens once a year, where you sit down with your boss and get formal feedback. If it only happens once a year, both of you are pretty relieved when the meeting is over, as opposed to this idea that feedback should be ongoing, it should be continuous, it should be in the moment, it should be, sort of immediately after an event. And again, a real good balance between what you did well, and here's some things that I would suggest you might think about doing differently that would have bigger impact.
Isn't that what they call, is it the bad news or the good news sandwich, where they go, hey, I loved I love that interview that you did.
That's right.
But you really didn't push those buttons properly, but that other interview was fantastic.
That's right. That used to be called the feedback sandwich. And that is, if you're going to give someone some feedback that might be a bit negative, you put a positive on one end, you give the feedback, and then you put a positive on the other end. People typically know when that's going down, and so it just makes a big difference if you give feedback on an ongoing basis. It's not such a big deal for a person, but remembering that as humans, we love to make a difference. We want to make a difference. There is a human need for esteem, which means that it's nice to just drop past a person's desk and say, hey, in that presentation that you just gave, you landed it really well. That made such a big difference in the outcome of the meeting. And that 10-second bit of feedback there can make someone's week.
Oh, absolutely.
Can make someone's week.
Absolutely. I make a point of doing that because I know when it's been done to me, it really means a lot.
That's right.
So if you are giving feedback and you want it to be a positive experience, what are the most important things that you need to consider?
Well, I think it's important to look forward versus looking back. I know we say feedback. There was this, a decade or so ago, there was this construct called feed forward. And
but took off, didn't it?
That's right. Feedback has prevailed. However, it is important to look forward, and that is, if you want this particular outcome, Here's what I suggest you think about doing differently. Build on what you did, but I would add this, or maybe I wouldn't spend as much time here, that type of thing. So in terms of looking forward, context is everything. So rather than just dropping by a person's desk to say, that wasn't a good meeting that you had, put it in context in the sense of this is a key stakeholder that is important for the business. And so therefore we need to do things a little bit differently in order to keep them with us. So feedback should be put in context. It should also be timely. And so it's not very effective when you drop past a person's desk 3 weeks after a scenario where it may be foggy in their minds or they have rationalized what happened in a different scenario.
Yes, we do.
That's right. And so it really should be timely in the sense of as immediately after a scenario as possible. Also above the line. Above the line means that we are focusing on a specific behavior or, a specific behavior, something you did, something you said that perhaps did not result in the best outcome. And so in that scenario there, it's not about you. Don't go into telling a person about their or surmising about personality or, you seem real insecure, so I'm not quite sure what that may be. That's going below the line. Above the line is you froze on that question when you got that question. And so let's talk about how you might do that differently as opposed to trying to diagnose a person, that type of thing. And then it's just it is important to play to aptitude. Each of us has different strengths. Each of us is wired differently. And in many respects, it is important to, in terms of a person having maximum impact, to focus on what they do really well and to reinforce that. How do you keep yourself in that zone? When you fall out of that zone, what happens? What are the factors that enable you to play to what would be natural aptitude? Some people are naturally analytical. And so they do well in that space. Some people can push things out conceptually. They do good in that realm. Some people are good interpersonally. And so a big part of feedback, particularly in a work context, is helping people to stay in that zone where they're playing to their strengths.
So if you are receiving the feedback, and you're right, usually if you go into a meeting like that, it's negative ones, what should you think about before going into the conversation?
Think about your own stretch, your own growth. It is in any role that we're in, no matter what role we're in, we're trying to build capability, we're trying to build confidence. The only way that you can do that, particularly in terms of knowing the impact you have, is to be able to receive feedback. So reframe it. For many people, it is negative because that's been the pain associated with the word feedback. But break that down. If you are the receiver going into a meeting, be curious. Be curious about what worked well and what you would build on. Keeping in mind that what worked well, again, ties directly to what you're naturally wired for. And so don't overplay the negative component. Make it build on the positive construct of, particularly in terms of your aptitude.
Okay, be positive and take it on. And also, quite often with that sort of feedback, it is meant to help you. And your manager might not necessarily be the best person to be doing it, but they are trying at the very least. So take on board what you can and don't do the folded arm
That's
things
right.
like, I'm not listening. What? I'm perfect. I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing to see here.
The folded arm things, both the receiver and the giver, if both are sitting there with folded arms, each needs to take a deep breath, relax, and go, let's just have a conversation about, what went well and what we can do.
Fabulous. Harold Hillman, thank you so much. You want more, go to sigmoidcurve.com.